Have you ever wondered what family secrets could shape the most powerful person on earth? What if I told you that behind closed doors, the Trump family harboured psychological wounds so deep they would ultimately influence global politics? Today, we're diving into one of the most explosive tell-all books of our time, written by someone who had unprecedented access to the inner workings of America's most controversial political dynasty. Mary Trump didn't just write another political expose. She dropped a psychological bomb that shook the foundations of how we understand power, family trauma, and the making of a president. As a clinical psychologist with a PhD from Adelphi University, she possessed the unique combination of professional expertise and intimate family knowledge that makes this book absolutely devastating in its revelations. What makes this story particularly gripping is that Mary Trump isn't some distant observer or political opponent. She's Donald Trump's niece, the daughter of his older brother Fred Jr., and someone who witnessed firsthand the family dynamics that she argues created what she calls the world's most dangerous man. This isn't political commentary from the outside looking in. This is family psychology from someone who lived it, studied it, and finally decided that the world needed to know the truth. The book became an instant bestseller, breaking records and igniting fierce debates about family loyalty, psychological analysis, and the intersection of personal trauma with public power. But beyond the headlines and political firestorm, this book offers something much more profound, a masterclass in how family systems can create both incredible success and devastating dysfunction simultaneously. Published in July 2020, during one of the most turbulent periods in recent American history, Too Much and Never Enough arrived like a perfectly timed revelation. Mary Trump, holding a doctorate in clinical psychology, made the bold decision to break decades of family silence and share her professional assessment of the psychological forces that shaped her Uncle Donald Trump's personality and worldview. The book's subtitle, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man, immediately signals its ambitious scope. This isn't merely a family memoir or political critique, but rather a psychological case study that attempts to trace the developmental origins of specific behavioural patterns that would later manifest on the world stage. Mary Trump argues that understanding her family's dysfunction is essential to comprehending the broader implications of Donald Trump's presidency. What sets this book apart from countless other Trump-related publications is the author's unique dual perspective. She combines the intimate knowledge of someone who grew up within the Trump family system with the analytical framework of a trained clinical psychologist. This combination allows her to observe family dynamics through both personal and professional lenses, creating a narrative that is simultaneously deeply personal and rigorously analytical. The book emerged during a period when America was grappling with questions about leadership, character, and the psychological fitness of its elected officials. Mary Trump's decision to publish represented a significant personal risk, as she broke long-standing family loyalties and potentially exposed herself to legal and financial consequences. Her motivation, she explains, stemmed from a sense of moral obligation to help the public understand the psychological forces at play in American politics. The timing proved crucial, as the book offered readers a framework for understanding not just individual behaviour, but systemic patterns that had been developing within the Trump family for generations. Mary Trump presents her family as a case study in how wealth, power, and dysfunction can combine to create personality traits that become magnified when transferred to positions of ultimate authority. The central thesis of Mary Trump's book revolves around the psychological concept of narcissistic personality development within a toxic family system. She argues that her grandfather, Fred Trump, created a family environment so psychologically damaging that it produced children incapable of healthy emotional development, with Donald Trump becoming the most successful yet most psychologically damaged product of this system. Mary Trump traces the family's dysfunction back to her grandfather Fred Trump, whom she describes as a sociopathic patriarch who valued financial success above all human considerations. Fred Trump, she argues, created a family hierarchy based entirely on financial productivity and loyalty to his business empire, while showing complete disregard for emotional needs, individual identity, or moral development. The book reveals how Fred Trump's favouritism toward Donald created a family dynamic where love and approval became conditional on performance and compliance. Mary Trump describes how her own father, Fred Jr., was essentially destroyed by the system because he dared to pursue his own interest in aviation rather than the family real estate business. His alcoholism and early death become, in Mary Trump's analysis, direct casualties of the family's toxic expectations. Donald Trump, according to Mary Trump's psychological assessment, learned to survive and thrive in this environment by developing what she identifies as narcissistic traits: an inability to empathize, a constant need for admiration, and a willingness to manipulate others to maintain his position within the family hierarchy. She argues that these survival mechanisms, which worked within the Trump family system, became deeply ingrained personality patterns that would later prove catastrophic when applied to political leadership. The book also explores how the family's enormous wealth insulated Donald Trump from the natural consequences of his behaviour, allowing these dysfunctional patterns to persist and intensify rather than being corrected through normal social feedback. Mary Trump suggests that her uncle never learned basic lessons about accountability, empathy, or genuine achievement because the family's resources always provided escape routes from failure. Throughout the narrative, Mary Trump weaves together personal anecdotes, psychological theory, and political analysis to create a comprehensive portrait of how family trauma can scale up to affect entire nations when the traumatized individual achieves ultimate power. The foundation of Mary Trump's analysis begins with her grandfather Fred Trump's creation of what she describes as a psychologically toxic family environment. Fred Trump established a household where children competed desperately for limited emotional resources, with approval granted only to those who served the family's financial interests. This system created what Mary Trump identifies as a breeding ground for narcissistic personality development, where children learned that their worth depended entirely on their ability to generate money and maintain loyalty to the family patriarch. The destruction of Fred Trump Jr. represents one of the book's most tragic and illuminating storylines. Mary Trump's father represented everything the family system was designed to eliminate: independence, creativity, and moral courage. When Fred Jr. expressed interest in becoming an airline pilot rather than joining the family real estate business, he faced systematic psychological warfare from his father and brother Donald. Mary Trump describes how the family's relentless pressure, combined with Donald's particular cruelty toward his older brother, contributed directly to Fred Jr.'s alcoholism and eventual early death at age 42. Donald Trump's emergence as the family's chosen successor forms another crucial narrative thread. Mary Trump reveals how her grandfather recognized Donald's willingness to embrace the family's ruthless business practices and gradually transferred increasing power to him. This transition involved Donald learning to manipulate his father, while simultaneously adopting Fred Trump's sociopathic approach to business and relationships. Mary Trump argues that Donald's success within the family system required him to suppress any capacity for empathy or genuine human connection. The book provides devastating insights into Donald Trump's actual business competence, revealing how family wealth and connections consistently rescued him from the consequences of poor decision-making. Mary Trump describes multiple instances where Donald's business failures were covered up or financially cushioned by family resources, preventing him from learning from mistakes or developing genuine expertise. This pattern, she argues, created a false sense of competence that would later prove disastrous when applied to political leadership. Mary Trump's account of family financial manipulation reveals sophisticated schemes designed to avoid taxes and maintain control over the family fortune. She describes how Fred Trump used various legal and quasi-legal mechanisms to transfer wealth to his children, while maintaining ultimate control over family members through financial dependency. These revelations provide context for later political controversies regarding Donald Trump's tax returns and business practices. The book explores how the family's psychological dysfunction affected multiple generations, with Mary Trump herself struggling to understand her place within this toxic system. She describes her own psychological journey toward understanding how family trauma had shaped her worldview and relationships. This personal narrative provides authenticity to her professional analysis, while demonstrating how family systems can damage even those who don't directly participate in the most destructive behaviours. Mary Trump's decision to speak publicly about her family represents the book's climactic moment. She describes the internal conflict between family loyalty and moral obligation, ultimately concluding that her uncle's political power posed such a significant threat to democratic institutions that silence was no longer ethically acceptable. This decision required her to overcome decades of family conditioning that prioritized loyalty above truth-telling. The book's final major theme involves Mary Trump's analysis of how family dysfunction translated into political behaviour. She argues that the same psychological patterns that made Donald Trump successful within the family system made him uniquely dangerous as a political leader. His inability to empathise, his need for constant admiration, and his willingness to manipulate others for personal gain became magnified when applied to presidential power, creating what she describes as unprecedented threats to democratic governance. Understanding family systems psychology becomes essential for comprehending how childhood experiences shape adult behaviour patterns. Mary Trump demonstrates how toxic family dynamics can create personality traits that persist throughout life, especially when those patterns are reinforced by wealth and power. This insight applies broadly to understanding how family environments influence leadership development and decision-making capabilities across various contexts. The relationship between wealth and psychological development reveals troubling patterns about how financial resources can insulate individuals from natural consequences. Mary Trump shows how the Trump family's enormous wealth prevented Donald from learning basic lessons about accountability and empathy. This takeaway suggests that extreme wealth can actually impede healthy psychological development by removing normal social feedback mechanisms that typically encourage personal growth and moral development. Narcissistic personality development within family systems creates individuals who may appear successful while lacking fundamental capacities for ethical leadership. Mary Trump's analysis reveals how survival strategies that work within dysfunctional families can become catastrophic when applied to positions of public responsibility. This insight offers valuable lessons for identifying and understanding narcissistic leadership patterns in various organisational contexts. The multi-generational transmission of trauma demonstrates how psychological damage can persist across family lines, affecting not just direct victims, but entire family systems. Mary Trump's account shows how her grandfather's sociopathic traits influenced multiple generations of family members, creating patterns of dysfunction that continued long after his death. This understanding can help individuals recognise and interrupt toxic family patterns in their own lives. The intersection of personal psychology and political power reveals how individual psychological problems can scale up to affect entire societies. Mary Trump argues that her uncle's personal psychological damage became a national security threat when combined with presidential authority. This takeaway emphasises the importance of psychological fitness in political leadership and suggests criteria for evaluating candidate suitability beyond traditional qualifications. The role of enablers in maintaining toxic systems shows how family members, employees, and institutions can perpetuate destructive behaviour patterns through silence and compliance. Mary Trump describes how various family members and business associates enabled Donald Trump's behaviour throughout his life, preventing him from facing consequences that might have encouraged change. This insight applies to understanding how toxic leaders maintain power across different organisational contexts. Breaking silence about family dysfunction requires enormous courage, but can serve broader social purposes. Mary Trump's decision to speak publicly about her family's psychological problems demonstrates how individual truth-telling can contribute to collective understanding of important social issues. This takeaway encourages readers to consider their own moral obligations when witnessing destructive behaviour patterns. The importance of psychological literacy in democratic societies becomes clear through Mary Trump's analysis of how family trauma can influence political behaviour. Her book suggests that citizens need better understanding of personality disorders and psychological dysfunction to make informed decisions about political leadership. This insight emphasises the value of psychological education as a component of civic engagement. Financial manipulation within family systems can serve as a tool for maintaining psychological control over family members. Mary Trump reveals how her grandfather used financial dependency to prevent family members from developing independence or challenging his authority. This understanding can help individuals recognise and respond to financial manipulation in their own family relationships. Professional training in psychology provides valuable frameworks for understanding family dynamics and individual behaviour patterns. Mary Trump's clinical psychology background enabled her to analyse her family's dysfunction with professional objectivity while maintaining personal authenticity. This takeaway suggests the value of psychological education for understanding human behaviour and making better decisions about relationships and leadership. Mary Trump's Too Much and Never Enough represents far more than a family memoir or political expose. It stands as a profound psychological case study that illuminates how individual trauma can scale up to affect entire societies. By combining intimate family knowledge with professional psychological analysis, Mary Trump has created a work that transcends traditional genre boundaries to offer insights that are simultaneously personal and universal. The book's greatest strength lies in its demonstration of how family systems psychology can provide frameworks for understanding complex political and social phenomena. Mary Trump's analysis suggests that comprehending individual leadership behaviour requires understanding the family dynamics that shaped personality development. This insight has implications that extend far beyond the Trump family to encompass broader questions about leadership selection, institutional design, and democratic governance. Perhaps most importantly, the book illustrates the moral complexity of truth-telling within family systems. Mary Trump's decision to break family silence required her to overcome decades of conditioning that prioritised loyalty above honesty. Her courage in speaking publicly about family dysfunction demonstrates how individual actions can serve broader social purposes, even when those actions come at significant personal cost. The book's impact extends beyond its immediate political relevance to offer lasting insights about human psychology, family dynamics, and the relationship between personal character and public leadership. Mary Trump has created a work that will likely remain relevant long after its immediate political context has passed, serving as a valuable resource for understanding how psychological factors influence leadership behaviour and social outcomes. For readers seeking to understand the intersection of psychology and politics, family dynamics and public leadership, or individual trauma and collective consequences, Too Much and Never Enough provides an essential framework for analysis that combines academic rigour with compelling storytelling.